So anyways, why don't we get into the main topic of discussion, which is El Momento Hispano, which, coincidentally enough, we've all kind of experienced together, right? We've seen this thing kind of coalesce or metastasize over the last couple of months. Really
Shit
with
posting on Twitter, that's how.
what? Say it again.
Just shit posting on Twitter, bro.
Shit posting on Twitter. You see where shit. So I actually went on Twitter because I was starting a business right before COVID, and so that went away.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. Somehow I got swept up in the whirlwind, man. And I ended up connecting with you guys. Fonz, we connected because of orthodoxy, right? And then Rico, we connected because we were just, I think I was shit posting with your friends.
Okay, so at first we were like kind of like shit posting at each other.
Yeah.
Kind of like beefing, but like just fucking around.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we ended up clicking together, so that shit was funny.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that happens a lot with me on Twitter, but it's how you get to know people. That's a very Hispanic thing, especially a very Mexican thing. It's like, you want to see what the person's about, so you kind of roughhouse in a non-serious way.
I see this.
So, we've seen how we've kind of gotten into beefs or Twitter wars with different groups, like Wignets or Muslims or liberal Latinx girls.
Sometimes in the same day, bro.
Sometimes back to back. It's honestly, it could be exhausting at times. But when we engage in that, a lot of stuff has come out, and it's kind of been an opportunity to really identify and define ourselves and really kind of understand, the commonalities. And really also dig into like our history, right?
Like, I guess I'll jump in, and I'll say that that like for the longest time, like the way that I kind of avoided the whole like Latinx pipeline was in like around middle school.
Mm-hmm.
I would shit post on like image boards, like 4chan and all that shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up playing Minecraft with like literal Wignats, bro. Shit was the funniest thing.
So this interaction with groups kind of has history. Like, it's not like this just happened on Twitter. Like, you're basically sharing with me that this thing has precedent. Like, this happened in somewhere else.
That's right.
That's right.
So that's how I kind of became aware. And then like I learned some things, but like one of the things I learned from like some of them were like cool, obviously, and they knew I was Mexican.
Sure.
But like what they taught me was like to kind of like be proud of who I am. You know what I mean? Like no andar de mama huevos, pues.
Claro.
Los dominicanos.
Why? Why was that? Because you were being attacked, or you just kind of reflected upon yourself?
Well, a little bit of both. So, like, some of them would be assholes, but like others would be kind of cool. So it was more like of an exchange between like ideas, because like before these guys, they never really had an opportunity to talk to someone from La Raza,
right?
Because it was just like a bunch of dudes like in the East Coast, you know what I mean?
Suburbs and shit.
Yeah. So it was cool, and then fast forward like a few years after I kind of like distanced myself from them just because of life, I ended up becoming like super in touch with the faith. Mm-hmm. So I made a Twitter because I think I found like Instagram posts or something like that. So I was with the Tradcast for a while, and then I left because era little la experiencia, bro. And then like something that I noticed about like American Catholics is that they tend to put like America first,
right?
You know what I mean? Like before God.
Puro cabrón was that? I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean.
You know what I mean? Like all that shit talking on the Pope and all that, which like, you know, our opinions may differ, but like if you're gonna be Catholic, you gotta go with it all the way, you know. But now it's kind of like I'm just kind of like just chilling right now. I ended up finding some fools from Mexi Twitter, different ideas. Not all of them were Catholic, so it was a good refresher, you know.
Wow. Yeah. No, I see so many parallels as well. You know, I've seen some of that same thing in the Orthodox circles that you're talking about, where kind of there's a conflict with Americans, right? With gringos. And
yeah, we call them boomer dogs.
They're Anglo, I guess, mindset.
Yeah. And so you see how like religion's not really making a difference in that sense. And I have my opinions on that. But yeah, so then I ended up here, and then you know, I don't know, just started connecting with a bunch of Pochos, and then just Latin Americans from all over Latin America. I actually connected with Twitter, right wing Twitter from Nicaragua. That was kind of cool, and I think it's just kind of spun out of there. But for me, it's been like I've seen how we've engaged with different groups when we've kind of beef with them. You know, the Muslims or different Wignats, and it's caused me to kind of dig into our history and really kind of take a moment to observe really what's going on, right? And I think again the moment of that this thing kind of bloomed was when the race riots started, and we saw that there was, you know, this tension in the United States of between black and white, and we realized that, well, we don't really fit into either one. You know, we may have some beef with one, or sometimes we have beef with another, or sometimes we might be cool with one or cool with another. It doesn't matter. Like we're not black and we're not white.
Correct. We value different things, and you know, just the way we approach life, it's a lot different from either group.
Right, and that's become real clear with this, and so it's caused me to kind of dig into history, dig into both Hispano history and also Anglo history to really try to understand it. Because for me, you know, part of the experience of being an Hispano from the United States is that you connect with Hispanos from all over, and we coalesce, right? Like we marry each other, you know. It's just we rub shoulders, we come into contact with each other, and those national distinctions kind of evaporate or they soften up a lot.
Because like to the Americans, dude, we're all beaners, you know.
Yeah, we're all Hispanos over here.
Right. Yeah, we're all Mexican or Puerto Rican or Dominican, just kind of depending on where you Cuban. Are. Right, depending on where you are in the country. So again, yeah, for me, it's this moment has shown itself to be that third position, and it's weird because what it shows is kind of a preview into our culture, right? That our identity is free from the dialectic, where, well, are we white or are we Indian? And that's kind of been a point of tension, perhaps when we looked into it, because it comes from what I like to call jam influence, right? From a Judeo-Anglo-Masonic influence, where these things aren't harmonized. But to bring it back to religion is that the reality is that this is very theological, and you can really see the difference in the history of England and the history of Spain, starting with the Reformation, right? So the Reformation cut the English off from that tradition of a really clear understanding of the Trinity and the two natures of Christ being both God and man. And so without a dialectical tension between those two things. And so the same thing with us, it's like we can reach roots to our maternal and we can reach roots to our paternal, and those two identities are mixed and there's no dialectical tension within them. So the moment has really been that we're embracing both our Indian roots and our Spanish roots. And it comes into conflict with the Wignats that, you know, think we're all Indios. And then it comes into conflict with the Latinxers who LARP as Indios because they think we're all like white nationalists. Correct?
Or, yeah, and they call them nationalists, colonizers way. Like, you could be a fool from Oaxaca and, like, be brown as fuck, but now you're a colonizer.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Those guys are morons.
So, anyway, so let's go through the present moment in the Americas. So what you realize is that the demographic moment, right? So there's 700 million Hispanos within Latin America and Anglo America. So that includes all our countries plus the diaspora that's within the United States. Now, when you compare this, there's 150 million whites in the United States. When we say white, we're not talking about Middle Easterners. We're talking about Anglo-Saxons, but also Irish, Italians.
Anglo-Saxon, Germanics.
Everyone who's taken on that identity. Yeah, all the deracinated Europeans.
Yeah.
And there's 40 million blacks. So one other thing about the Hispanic group is that it's the only one that has positive birth rates, right?
Yep.
We're barely at 2.2, but in comparison, the black fertility rate is 1.8 and the white is 1.6, and 2.1 is the minimum replacement To give you a comparison, the EU is 1.5. So that means that every woman has that amount of kids. And you need at least 2.1. So we're just barely over 2.1. To break this down, what do these numbers mean? So to give you an example, for every 58-year-old Anglo, which is the median age of an Anglo in the United States, there's 4 22-year-old Hispanos. And in the United States, this is across Hispanoamerica. So there's 4 22-year-olds for every 1 58-year-old. In the United States, the average Hispano's age is 11 years old compared to the Anglo who's 58. So I want to just touch on these demographics to understand the moment. Now, as we go into the black versus white fight, the great race war of 2020, again, we've touched on how the Hispano is the third position that frees us from this black and white dialectic. And we've also seen that Hispanos have been the heroes of the great race war, right? Everyone who's kind of put themselves on the line, anyone who's taken a stance to keep order, has been Hispanic.
Yep.
Yeah, for the most part.
It's like a joke that they were saying on the Twitter. It was like, Latinos, we're doing the work that the white man can't do or doesn't want to do.
Yeah,
it's because most of them middle class white people, they're like race soft. It's like, I don't know, they're weak.
Yeah, and of course there's a difference because like La Raza, we've been with like the people with this type of like I guess like a constant battlefield,
Yes.
Like either struggling through the barrios or making it across and setting up your business.
Yes.
So and even before like these riots kicked off, right? Like during the beginning of the quarantine, there was like a trend that like you would see like a bunch of like young like black kids, right? They'd be assaulting paleteros or like your abuelo that's just like walking back with groceries. So La Raza, we kind of were already encabronados. Y pues, they had to put in work, and that's what ended up happening, man.
Yeah. And I look at it. So one of the things that I touch on here is why have the Hispanos done that? What is it about Hispano culture? What is it about our values or our identity roots that have positioned us to do that, right? And let's just go through a couple of them during the Great Race Wars. So there was the Latin Kings in Southwest Chicago. I think it's like Cicero and I forget the other neighborhood.
Little Village, I think.
Little Village, that's right.
Yeah, Little Village, the Mexican areas.
Right. So all the Mexican gangs were protecting their neighborhoods and they were chasing protesters out. And they put into the work. There was another one in New Mexico. The guy who was about to get smashed with a skateboard by a white guy, he shoots the guy. They were trying to take down a statue. I don't know if you guys remember that one.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
And then
he was Hispanic?
Yeah, he was Hispanic.
Yeah.
So they were trying to take down the statue, and he's trying to stop them. And then this white guy comes at him with a skateboard, and this guy shoots, I think, 1 or 2 into the white guy. I don't think he killed the white guy, but he got let go because he was in self-defense.
Yeah, because he was packing.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, life in danger.
The one in Portland where it was like Hispanic. He was pretty young too, just by the way that he dressed and how his face looked. But like, he made a wrong turn into an intersection. Am I disconnecting, bro?
No, I think Fonz got disconnected, but he'll come back in.
All right, I'll continue. So, like, he made like the story as like I know is that like he made a wrong turn, and like this was when they were like setting up like that autonomous zone and shit like that.
Right.
So he ended up kind of like trying to back out.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. He got into a gunfight.
Morenos were trying to press him, so el vato pues sacó el Glock, and he put to work. He put to work after that. He was like, all right, I'm gonna find the nearest cop and turn myself in.
Right.
So like he could have like ran. He could have like driven through the crowd, but
he's gonna deal with the case.
He tried to get out. Yeah.
Like
he
a man.
Tried to get out. They tried to pull him out, so he had to use that Glock, and he turned himself in.
I should try to reach out to him. I've been trying to reach out to all these guys, and I've had some success.
How about the guy with the chainsaw?
The chainsaw, yeah.
That was like a few months back.
El Tío Peña.
Hey.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was just like a working class guy who, from I think McAllen, Texas, who saw basically a bunch of spoiled white kids trying to like destroy local businesses. And so you could tell, you know,
and it was in the Hispanic part of town, right?
Yeah. And he's just trying to scare them off. Like he was yelling at kids, you know, he was being a dad. It was really a dad moment, but they try to make it seem in the paper like, you know, he's a racist and he was really going to chop these kids up with a chainsaw. And it's like, they really came down on him. And I'm not really sure what the legal situation is with him, but I hope it's okay. You know, we're here to help if you're listening. So yeah, you saw, and I think there was examples too in Miami with like some Cubans and Puerto Ricans, or, you know, there was like a group of guys I remember that were all suited up guarding the neighborhood, and Dominicans in New York, I think, as well.
Yeah, so, they were chasing off some of the looters from their barrios, you know?
Right. And it's like you said, this thing's kind of been brewing in the background. I mean, we always have issues with different racial groups, and they go through their ups and downs. But it has been kind of going up, it seems, in tensions with blacks. That definitely has to be noted.
Mm-hmm. And I think not just that, but what I've noticed also is, like, you know how whites, they're being castrated when they try to defend themselves?
Yeah.
By like being labeled as racist and shit like that. It's instead of like white women like trying to castrate us, like I see Latinx, you know, was raza that's like indoctrinated, bro. And you see them like saying, oh, like, you know, you need to address the anti-blackness in your community. But like, you know, you just gotta look at the rap videos, güey, cuando sacan como ese del YG que se vistió de mariachi y todo bien bonito, ¿verdad?
Ah, sí.
Like if it was a fool that was like, you know, putting on like an African cultural dress, right? I'm not even going as far as saying blackface, but like something like that.
Yeah.
You know, they'd be throwing a fit.
They'd be crying.
But like that's what I noticed, that there was like a spike, you know, where like they'll start adding these morenos, bro, into like these rap videos, and they're trying to like kind of capitalize to make money off of us, and then the Latinxers are all here standing it, but they turn a blind eye to the paletero on the corner that's like getting, you know, beat up for fun.
That's such a good point. Man. And they never talk about the paleteros, and they never talk about, I mean, when a white girl does something that supposedly is a black thing, you know, they make a big fuss over it. But when you got negros acting like Hispanos, I guess it's not a big deal. Because the reality is, in those people's heads, we're black. We're an oppressed class. Mm-hmm. We have a sob story. We've been victimized. We've been raped. We've been enslaved. This fucking bullshit, this victim mentality. And that's not an Hispano way of looking at it. I'm not a victim. But you see how that's rooted in the black legend. Right, the black legend is, the Spanish raped and pillaged and enslaved the Indians. And when you start actually digging into the history, you realize like these motherfuckers are kind of lying.
Like, now there's a reason why there's a substantial Indio population in Latin America, and you see like a few in reservations, bro, just drinking their lives away here in like Anglo America, you know.
Yeah, where are the Indians in Anglo America? You know, throw a quick stat. When the United States, the year that the United States took over California and annexed it, there was 150,000 Native Americans in California. 40 years later, there was 16,000 left. So about 10% of them were all that was left. Everybody was killed systematically. So in Latin America and Hispanoamerica, you know, the reality is just everything we've been told about the Spanish Empire, which wasn't much, but anything that was said, it was always done in negative light. And a lot of it is actually rooted in the Masonic liberal...
The Protestant...
But even before then, when the wars of independence were done by the Latinxers of their day, right? It was this criollo class who was looking out, who was looking outwards and kind of wanted to be part of the trend, just like Latinxers are. And we have Latinxers in Latin America too. They're just not quite the same, but they kind of have the same values.
They're more like in the capital and like the very urbanite areas. So it's a newly imported idea. Which is like that's why I tell people that like Latinx is just a form of like linguistic colonization,
imperialism. You gotta use the buzzwords against them.
You have to, bro, because it's true, right? Because you're
framing it in their language. Way. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Totally. You're trying to deny us our roots, but then they'll say, well, because Spanish is white, and so now the Spanish are white. The Spanish always go in and out of being white or not.
So that's every Mediterranean, bro.
yeah, exactly. We're basically non-Germanic, Nordic, European. So But yeah, let me get back to the outline here. So again, we touched on why are Hispanos being heroic and Anglos not. And so now I want to get into defining really what is Hispano. Is it a race? Is it ethnicity? And what this opens up is the reality that Americans don't understand the concept of ethnicity. They don't really fully understand the concept of race either. They kind of blend it together and make it this weird thing. And because of that, they don't really understand Hispanos. They don't understand the Hispano paradigm. They don't understand how they automatically assume that we have to feel shame of being either partially native or
fucking goblins, bro.
Or
pretty much, right?
Goblinos.
Like in their eyes, we're just rape babies.
Yeah, it's so pathetic because I mean, let's be honest, bro. Hispanos tend to be handsome. Like, there's nothing wrong with saying that. Like, women around the world love the Hispano phenotype because there is a diversity in our phenotype. We're handsome. We're the cosmic race. See or no?
See.
Yeah, we look good. I mean, you compare it to Amerimuts, they look all disfigured. It's fucked up to say, but I mean,
not holding punches, bro.
No, it's true. Let's just
Goblino meme exists for a reason.
Right,
the 56% meme, bro.
And the thing is, yeah, exactly. They send what they do is they always project a lot of insecurities on us, right? Because they're the rapists, they think we're the rapists. Because they're, thieves or whatever the hell, they tell us that we're thieves or we're inferior, which is just not true.
Mm-hmm.
So now, again, to try to define what is the Hispano ethnicity, because again, Hispano is not a race, right? Because we're multiracial and some of us have more of one race or another. Some of us have none of the other. There's kind of three basic ones. It's really two, right? It's really the mestizo is like the birth of the nation, but there was other people who kind of mixed in and other people who kind of mixed in and other people who kind of mixed in. And then you kind of realize, well, this is beyond race, right? It's like an ethnic program. And so what are the roots of those things? And I like to identify three. One, Cristo Rey, which I like to define as the universal logos, right? It's la iglesia. It's the church with a capital C. It's universal. It's eternal. And what it causes a person is to take humility before God, right? Hispanos aren't the greatest theologians, but they're they're pious people because they do not forget their position to God's. And the Catholic tradition has been ours for 500 years, and it's a very ancient version of the Catholic tradition that has to be noted, right? It's the Catholicism from the 1600s. And that tradition, we understand this theology of the Trinity, of the two natures of Christ. So that dialectical tension doesn't really exist. The Spanish did not live like that. Any characterization of the Spanish Empire existing in this racial tension and dialectics is a complete misunderstanding of history. It's really the Black Legend. And when you look at the roots of the Black Legend, you find our historical enemies, which I like to call them Ugandans and Anglos. Are the two historical enemies of
don't forget the French
and the French, of course, and there's other people who played a role. The second root that I like to identify is la lengua española, which is our paternal root, right? That's where overwhelmingly when you test our DNA, and I've actually been digging into this because the subject of race keeps coming up, and I looked into what a traditional, typical middle-class family looked like in New Spain, in Mexico City. So there's a lot of scholarship that's been done by going through those records, which I'll share. But I also looked at the DNA of all the different countries, and overwhelmingly, the paternal root of Hispanos, 80+% is R1b, right? Which is Meds, right? We're basically Mediterranean stock people. And that's our paternal root, and that's the same for Black Cubans, as it is for white Argentinians, as it is for red Peruvians, and everybody else in between those mixes. So to connect it to how I've been digging, this academic's name, I forget her name. I think it's Pilar something. She's actually a Spanish lady, but she's very Mexican. She's an academic in Mexico, and she digs into basically what was domestic life like during New Spain, and she looks at things like wills and inheritance documents, And one of the things that she's noticed that's very common is like the story always goes the same. It was a Spanish man who came. When he came, you know, he was single. He kind of got involved with an Indian lady. He didn't take her on as a formal wife, but, you know, informally, that was his wife. They had a kid. Then he orders basically a Spanish bride who's like 20 years younger than him. And they actually get officially married. So then he has 3 kids with her, but he also had a black house slave, which he got into. And then he had a mulatto kid with her. And then, you know, some lower class person left the baby at their door. And so they adopted the baby at the door and just took him in. And so now this man's inheritance pack, and this is a middle class guy. I think he was like a carpenter or something. And this guy, what was interesting about this guy was that he was actually labeled at birth as so one of the things to understand is how the Spanish really viewed race, right? And castas, this whole thing about the castas, which isn't what we think. People think that the caste system, this was like a caste system in India. That's not at all what it was like. It was like a part of the form you filled out. Now, there was certain privileges to certain groups, but that didn't mean that if you were born in a certain group, you couldn't ascend into the other group. And this man that I'm talking about, and I can share the details, obviously, with everybody, but this man was actually a mulatto, right? That's how he was labeled. And then he married a Spaniard, but because he came from, there was another concept called calidad, and that was really important to them, right? So say you were a mulatto and you became a really good carpenter and you became very respected in your town and all the nobles used you for their projects. Well, that would improve your calidad, right? And these documents would kind of mark that. And then when this guy married a Spanish girl, because of his calidad allowed him that privilege, right? Now his documents from that point on, he's all of a sudden Spanish. So he's no longer mulatto. Now he's Spanish, right? So sacó raza is what we say in Nicaragua. We guys have that concept in Mexico.
Que mejorar la raza.
Sí, así es.
Right.
So that's what this guy basically did. And then his inheritance, like he frees his mulata daughter. He, basically gives a piece to all these kids, according to, you know, whatever whatever the tradition was, which obviously the Spanish kids were going to get more, but most often than not, it was the mestizo kid that was the favorite and maybe got better education and so many things when you start digging into it. And I'll be sharing a lot of that content, basically translating it, of how diving into the actual records and just pulling these stories from these people, it paints a picture of what life was like in those times. And it's something that we definitely need to get an understanding of, because what's happened over history is that for 300 years we had an empire, and then for 200 years we lived under this kind of liberal, capital liberal, what do we call it? The yoke of the liberals, right? Which was basically, again, this criollo class, this proto-Latinxer that basically destroyed our empire, and we know history has gone on long enough where we're like, no podemos tapar el sol con un dedo, right? We can't block the sun with a finger, with our thumb. All this stuff is provable. We know how much gold was extracted. We know how many cities were founded. All this stuff actually has records. And so, at the end of this tunnel, it's not saying that we're going to, reunite and take a Spanish king. But again, it at least offers us now we put the conversation up on the table, and it gives us opportunity to say, look back and really see, well, what can we do? Or what shall we do? How shall we move this thing forward? Because again, going back to the demographical situation, right? This cultural moment where it's like, we're on the border. Do we want to go that way or do we want to go this way? So this is really part of that exercise. But again, to touch on the lengua española, it's a paternal root. It's the patriarchy. Again, we are a father's seed. So to give you that example of that typical family, the reality is that we are all, whether you're a black Cuban, chances are more than 80% you'll have the same paternal DNA, which tells you that the guy who was making babies was the Spanish guy, right? And again, that's what creates our brotherhood. But more than this, the Spanish language, it goes beyond Spain, right? It's more than just Spain. We touched on it. It's kind of this Roman legacy, right? It's a spiritual, civilizational, cultural legacy that is the Roman legacy. And we can connect to it culturally, genetically, which is very interesting. But it also presents an imperial model. And, I'll touch back into this point, but it's very important to note how this heritage of Spain also itself is what created the Spanish Empire as it is, as opposed to the British Empire. And the last root is el mestizaje, our maternal root. So el mestizaje took different forms in different regions, right? It's been a process of 500 years that this has actually happened. The mestizaje in Mexico is different from the mestizaje in the Caribbean. It's different from the mestizaje in Argentina or in Peru. But again, when you even go down into the genetics and when we understand these two other roots of our identity, we realize that it's really a brotherhood that extends from Pocholandia down to southern Chile. And again, the key takeaway here is Cristo Rey, right? That concept is what frees us of false dialectics. So we're able to embrace both our paternal root and our maternal root without that tension.
Of course, putting God first, it always fixes so much things.
Right.
You get like a lot more leeway that way.
Absolutely. And that's a very profound difference between us and, I'll skip ahead here to the Anglo culture to since we have that on the table here. Let me show you. What are the three roots of Anglo and identity, right? Which is white, right? Anglos own the copyright on what's white. And really their culture is classical liberalism. So there's been three things that I've identified in their history. First one is Henry's Reformation, right? It's a rebellion against the church. It sets a bad theology. They lose sight of the Trinity. They lose sight of Jesus Christ's two natures. They enter into dialectical tensions. And with that separation from the church, it kills their cultural roots, right? You can sever a plant from its roots and it'll still live for a while. And that's kind of what this has been the last 200 years, where they've kind of been in prominence. But what they did, it was a sacrifice. They rooted their cut themselves from their cultural roots, and you can see it in many ways. Architecture, folklore, all that stuff. The Anglos don't have that compared to other peoples, even other people like the Germans. The second identity root is Elizabeth's alchemy, right? And that's a rebellion against God's order. It's built on usury, piracy, masonry, basically an inversion, the Baphomet. And even she represented kind of this
being subversive.
Yeah, it's an inversion, it's the gender fluidity that even she displayed. You see it in the global homo today. And in fact, I don't know if you know this, but her top spy, his name is John Dee, right? He was a magician. He is like the archetype magician alchemist. His code name was 007. And, that's really what she introduced. And if you think about it, she's a queen. She never married. She never had a kid. She never humbled herself before a king, which connects to when I compare her to Isabella. But let me touch on the third root, which was Cromwell's regicide, right? So Cromwell actually killed their king. So before the United States kicked their king out, before the French killed their king, the English had already killed their king. And they killed him because he was a Catholic, right? So he was trying to tie back those roots to this tree that these crazy people had cut off, and they killed him. And so that's what Cromwell does, is that he invites the Jews in. Remember that to compare Elizabeth to Isabella, one of the things that Isabella did was that she kicked the Jews out. She kicked the Muslims out. If they didn't convert, if they didn't get down with the program, they got kicked out. Where Cromwell invites them in, and then basically that's what finances the British Empire, because up until that point, all they did was be pirates. But that's what creates the Bank of London and the British East India Trading Company. The Dutch also had something similar, but even people much later, like Rhodes, who founded Rhodesia, which is, I think, the diamond guy, right? It was always a commercial enterprise. So that's really the fundamental difference between Isabella and Elizabeth. Let me go back here, which actually was the next point. So again, I like to break it down into these two queens, La Reina Isabel and Queen Elizabeth. La Reina Isabel being representative of Rome, Queen Elizabeth being representative of Carthage. So what you had with the Spanish is that you had a civilizational empire, whereas the British were a commercial empire. And you can think of Rome and you can think of the Phoenicians, right? The Phoenicians model was basically we build ports and we trade and we take things from one side to another side, whereas Rome was really a civilizational project. Again, that ties back into Spain. Materialism versus spirit, empiricism versus poetry, family, the Hispano value versus GDP and IQ, right? We run into that one a lot.
Oh yeah.
But then we also see this racial taboo that the English developed, whereas in the Spanish domain, you had el mestizaje, right? And it wasn't looked down upon. It was the Roman model. And another way you can see the difference, the dichotomy between these two queens, is that there's no white guilt or black anger in Latin America, right? So, you have white people for all intents and purposes in Latin America, tons of them. They're probably like 20% at the very least, or somewhere around there total. They don't feel white guilt, right? There's not even really a racial consciousness, and I see this with in my family. Like, I have people who are very, very white. I have people who look a lot Afro. I have people who look super native. So you have these kind of three poles, and it's very hard to kind of build these walls of separation between us. I don't know if you guys have experienced something like that.
Well, I'd say yeah, because over in Durango, bro, you see guys that are prietos, going out with güeritas and shit like that,
Right.
And it's sure, sometimes I notice that that this American racial view of white, which to be honest, it's an American or an Anglo construct, right? Made to justify justify basically their existence, right? Because it's a definition that changes over time. Like the Italians, bro,
right?
They were not white; they were subhuman, and the Irish too. And what a lot of these countries had in common was that they were Catholic countries. So the definition of white was something to ensure that Protestants were flooding into America,
Right.
But yeah, oh man, I went on a tangent, but
no, that's crucial to understand that this definition has changed. Even today, like in the census, Spain isn't considered white. If you're Spanish from Spain, you're not supposed to mark white. You're supposed to mark Hispano. So again, they're stuck with it, right? They don't really understand that. But again, these are the two differences. So we touched on Anglo identity. So basically, we understand our identity. We understand Anglo identity. We understand how it's expressed between these two queens. So now it comes down to what do we do, right? What do we need to understand in order to kind of keep going in this kind of flowering that's happened, right? Of consciousness, you can say, or of interest in one's history and identity. So first thing, we need to dispel the black legend, right? So, which we've been doing informally, but the reality is that there is enough research, academia out there to be able to bring these things to the forefront and really dispel it, because the biggest beef we have is probably, or the most intense beef is probably with Latinxers, at least for me personally. They're the ones who always get me in trouble.
It's our own people, They
get vicious.
It's our own people, and the thing is that it's sort of an uphill battle, because this whole academia of the black legend, right? It's something that's been firmly entrenched within our systems. Even before the whole cultural Marxism took a major prominence, in these recent decades. The whole idea that every Mexican was an Aztec, or a formerly enslaved Aztec. Right, and that the Spanish was the evil white man,
Yeah, and you see
that has left an imprint.
But we have to also understand. We have to understand how that comes from our classic liberal governments that destroyed the empire. Let me put it in perspective for you. Mexico is 20% the size of what it was under New Spain. Right, Mexico didn't just lose the northern chunk. It lost Cuba. It lost Central America. It lost the Philippines even, right? That was all part. Philippines. It was all part. You see that would have worked out for you well, huh? It lost.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
So Mexico was really 20% of the size of what New Spain was, and enough research has been done in the quality of life, and what was how many conflicts. I don't know if you guys have seen this infographic from Mundo Republiqueto, but it shows all the military conflicts that have happened since independence in all the countries in Latin America. And it got so big that they had to split it into two. And they almost had to split it into three, because Mexico's conflicts were like 3 columns of conflicts.
We're always at war. We're always at war.
Right. And then when you compare it to what it was the 300 years before that, even with at the height of Indian wars, it never got that brutal, which is crazy. It shows that Indians were being integrated into the empire. They weren't being subjects. They weren't being enslaved, as they like to say. Again, because this extends from the Roman model, right? What is the Roman model, since we've touched on it? The Roman model is, we're going to come to your land. We're going to fight. We're going to kick your ass. You're basically going to be our bitch. You're going to be our servants for a while. You're going to be our intern. That doesn't mean all of you, because we recognize that some of you are like higher class folks and nobility. So like, we have respect for that. But over time, what's going to happen is you're going to learn the Roman system. You're going to learn Roman values. You're basically going to become Romanized. And then what we'll do is we'll make you a citizen, and you'll be just as Roman as anybody else. Right. And now that's a process that takes time, but eventually your country will be integrated as a province into our empire. And, let it be known that Roman emperors weren't strictly from the city of Rome. There was emperors from all over the empire. So again, the Spanish Empire was molded on that model. So to kind of bring it back to the first point was, we need to dispel the black legend, because the Latinxers, and I'm not saying it's going to have an effect on them, but we need to be real clear on really what the situation historically was and be able to just kind of show that and understand that for ourselves, because what it does, it heals a lot of perhaps gripes we had internally, right? Like, shit, people are telling you your whole life you're a rape child, so fuck, maybe I am, right? You start kind of believing, you start falling into a Stockholm syndrome. But then when you kind of realize really what was the Spanish Empire, what was the birth of our ethnicity, and we can understand that, right? It's been 500 years of ethnogenesis, and even before those 500 years, we have thousands of years of legacy on both sides, right? We touched on this earlier. We can stretch one arm and go all the way back to Rome, and we can stretch another one and go all the way back to the Olmecs, right? The first things that happened that sprung out of this land. And then I think another thing to understand is, ask ourselves, can Anglos benefit, right? Could they actually work under our system? Is it better? Will it give them something to defend? Because one of the things that we touched on was, why are Hispanos being the heroes and why not the Anglos? And I think it's because all the things we've touched on, the Hispano has these roots. He has an identity. He has values. His value isn't pure money or materialism. It's his kids, right? It's his wife being happy. It's being able to play the role of provider and protector. And these things aren't quantifiable. It's being able to listen to some folkloric music and share that with that moment with his family and his friends. So the question is, can Anglos benefit in the system? And I would argue that they could, but I leave that question open to you guys.
I feel like, especially in the South, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard this come up. Why do you feel that way?
Well, for me, go ahead, Fonz. All right, for sure. Well, for us, because like a lot of the Southern identity has roots, especially if you go to the Southwest, and it kind of se desparramó pues to like the rest of the South, right? Like you see these Anglo guys, dress up in like vaqueros and shit,
cowboys,
and like who was the original vaqueros, right? It was the Spanish,
right?
And it was the mestizo thing,
right?
So there's already a cultural basis, but the thing is that we'll have to overcome the racial view, because they don't see us as vaqueros. They see us as the caricatures that they're used to growing up of, like Paco hopping.
Shit, I'm not sure what the fuck happened. Yo, can you guys hear me?
All right, you back?
Yeah, sorry.
Are you still recording?
Yeah. So you said they have to humble down, right? Like they have this ego that they like to denigrate and think they're superior to us. They like to think like, oh, Speedy Gonzalez gave my burrito, like stupid bullshit like that.
Yeah. Yeah, but like I'll bring up something like who's in the South, right? and Duranguenses, like something that we have in common, bro. That's like weird to like other states is like Coca-Cola and peanuts, bro. We put peanuts in our bottles of like glass Coke, you know, and we drink them like that, right? It's like little quirks like that shows that there's like a bridge, at least between northern Mexico and the American South, because of the rural areas that it is, and just the I guess the intertwined, like, not destiny, but like the roots. You know, there's a common root.
Yeah, because what was the South to now move into American history? The South was like the genteel, the traditional. There were the trads of America. And when you look at it, even the people who emigrated there, were all mostly Celtic. They were all mostly Scots, right? So they weren't Anglos. Though the Scottish were, you know, kind of integrated into the British Empire, they came from somewhere else. But also, a lot of the people who emigrated there were the ones who were involved in this war between Cromwell and what's that guy's name? The Jacobites. Do you know, Fonz, the British king that they capped?
Was it King Charles? No, not Charles. Right? I forget the name of that king.
James, maybe.
James. Yeah, no, it is.
I think
James.
It was Charles and James.
James II, right?
I think it was Charles is James' dad. Basically, these two kings fought, and I think one of them was killed. And that's really when Cromwell took over, and that's when he invited in the Jews that basically Spain had kicked out 100 years before. And so they got together, they came together, and it's really been a war against us ever since. And you have to understand that the black legend isn't just about being anti-Spanish; it's about being anti-Catholic, right? It's about rejecting all these other things that we had touched on when we talked about the Cristo Rey point. It's rejecting that world. That's where liberalism comes from. It comes from rejecting that. And so then all these things spring out from liberalism, right? Communism comes from liberalism, feminism, all the bullshit that we look around and we are at the point where, no, this is not the way it is. We're rejecting this wholesale. Comes from liberalism, comes from this rebellion of the English to the church, to capital T tradition. They had a Reformation based on some theological points, like at least what's his face, the Protestant guy, Martin Luther. At least he presented an essay. The English was basically this guy wanted to get a divorce and marry another chick so he can try to have a son. Right? It was basically this fat guy's lust. That
pure vanity, bro.
That gave them carte blanche to go and raid the monasteries, raid the commonwealth of the English peasant, and really that's Anglo history. It's just the Judeo-Anglo elite, or I should say the Ugandan Anglo elite, using the peasant as cannon fodder or slaves. That's really been the Anglo Empire. While they've enriched themselves. So, you know, you touched on, can they benefit? Cowboys is a good example. You talked about the Confederacy. I think another example touching on the Confederacy is there's a colony of the Confederacy in Brazil, right? There was a group of people who had moved there, and they still have like yearly balls and festivals to kind of celebrate their unique heritage. Are you guys aware of that?
Yeah. And also,
pretty cool.
After the Civil War, the American Civil War, the Mexican Civil War was kind of happening at the same time, and it was like beginning to wrap up, right?
Right.
Because after the Civil War, Lincoln started sending troops and armament to help out Juarez, and with Maximiliano, a lot of Dixie generals. I gotta look up the names, but I remember reading that a lot of Dixie generals came to Maximilian and they pledged their swords to him. So,
wow.
You know, Dixies came to Mexico, you know, and they ended up, it's like another repeat, you know, like you go back to the Mexican-American War, right? The Irish who defected, you know, and started the San Patricio Batallon, right?
Right.
It goes back to like these people that are, you know, they're disenfranchised from the Anglo-American Yankee, whatever you want to call it, establishment, right?
Yep.
And they find common ground with, like, you know, these Mexicans to the south.
Yeah, again, because these people are more connected to a deeper tradition than the Yankees, right? The Yankee is pure commerce. It's pure commerce. Whereas the Southern was more genteel. There was a hierarchy. You know, there was, it was more of a traditional gender roles. And then I think another example that's more modern is like carnales, right? Like there's tons of white dudes, woods, who
become fools.
Yeah, who get integrated. Woods get integrated into prison gangs, into street gangs. And there's a history of that. I mean, you know, the La M, the Mexican Mafia, had Peg Leg Morgan as, you know, one of its early members. But there I have actually looked into it in the Mexican Mafia. There's been several, not just Croatian Catholic Slavs, but, you know, just more gringo Anglos. There's been Japanese, Filipinos, even there's been half black, Samoan, everything you can think of. And I find it really interesting because it shows that even in something like a microcosm, you know, or macrocosm, depending how you want to size it up, obviously they're a big deal. But the Mexican Mafia, how even they express a certain tradition, cultural understanding of what we've inherited, which is, again, the Spanish Empire, which is part of the Roman model, right? It's a civilizational thing that kind of absorbs the best people, and in a sense, after a while, they do prove themselves, right? The carnales who are non-Hispano, non-Mexican, plus non-Hispano are going to put in more work, right? When they wanted to join, they put in more work to prove that Mexican heart, in a sense, right? Which it's what I like to say, you know, Romanitas est Hispanitas, right? Like Hispanitas is a Mexican heart. And I think it's really interesting. So I think Anglos can benefit. I don't know if you guys want to touch more on that subject.
Yeah, just like a little, like, just to add on. Like for in NorCal, you know, like a rapper that like a lot of Nortes they love to listen to is Woody. You know, I don't know if you heard of him, but he's like a white dude.
Yeah,
you know, I think he's
a norteño, right? He's always red.
Yeah.
He
wears red. You know, rest in peace, Woody. But
he rested.
His music, you know, it impacted the Chicanos up here in the north. You know, the 14ers, like you call them.
Right.
And it's just like another proof. And then I've also, I'll stick to that. I won't get into too much, but yeah.
Well, I mean, there's also been historically, even throughout the whole Spanish Empire, you have to understand that the Spanish Empire wasn't just the Americas and the Philippines. It was also Europe, right? Southern Italy was part of the Spanish Empire. The Netherlands were part of the Spanish Empire. Austria. So there was always other people who played a role. There was, you know, from the very earliest moments, Irish, even Moors who had converted to Catholicism. I think the first person to land off Columbus's boat was actually a Moor, I've been told. I don't know if you guys know much about that.
I don't, but yeah.
Yeah, when I've dug into it, I've seen like part of the conquistadors, the original set of conquistadors, there was blacks in it. Like actual African blacks who basically became Spanicized.
Like Juan Gallardo, right? That's his name?
I think so.
So he was getting like hacienda because he fought well.
Right.
That's right.
Against Aztecs, I believe.
Right.
I mean, it's common with a lot of the native tribes that and even Aztecs to an extent. A lot of the tribes that like or not tribes, but because there were nation states, right?
Yeah.
That allied with the Spanish coming down, right? Like going back
That's
to
right.
the whole Leyenda Negra.
Oh my God, that is so crucial.
The Tarascos, right? They teamed up with the Spanish,
right?
And at the end, they were given special privileges. They were giving titles of nobility, you know, and shit like that.
That still exists.
So you can't paint it. That's like,
Yeah, they're basically Spanish shock troops for 300 years, right?
Yeah, they were the auxiliaries, you know, like what would in Roman times be the auxiliaries, which would be like local Germanic tribes that, you know,
were being integrated
the banner and used their they ended up being integrated after, you know.
Yeah, and that's another interesting chapter there. That when the conquest of the Philippines, which was headed by Legazpi el Viejo, all his generals were his grandsons, and they were all mestizo. So
And
there was natives, there was indigenous natives, Tarascans, Tlaxcalans, who fought Turks and Arabs in the Philippines to conquer the Philippines.
Yeah, it's crazy, and you could see it today with the Filipino culture, like molcajetes, camote. Like that came over from Mexico, from the natives that stayed there and decided to make their life.
Yeah, absolutely. It went both ways. There's a lot of Mexicans who basically stayed in the Philippines. Again, the Philippines was part of New Spain. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. It shows how other people have always been. I mean, how many other conquistadors were were Italian, right? I mean, Columbus himself was Genoan, but there was a ton of them. So it was never. It was always, again, it was a civilizational empire. I think that's really crucial to understand. And it was just a new expression of what was the Roman Empire. And I think that actually brings us into the future, because now it's like, okay, here's this moment of consciousness. We realize we're not white, we're not black, we don't fit into this Anglo-Gringo paradigm. We really have a deeper understanding of our roots going both ways, primarily from a spiritual standpoint, right? That's what really separates us from, even when your experience with American Catholics, my experience with American Orthodox, is that they really have a intellectual approach to everything. It's not a spiritual understanding, which I think is a lot easier for an Hispano to understand, because it's just part of his cultural DNA.
Well, Noel, about the intellectual approach was Catholics. I blame the Irish for that one, because till this day, a lot of them apostatize because they say the nuns used to whip their asses too hard, or it's crazy how legalistic, just the stories I've heard. Like I said, it could be all bullshit, but that's what I heard, like from the Irish point of view.
Yeah, no, it does seem like the Irish have kind of gone more into because the Irish really tried to be more integrated, right? They were never really accepted. I mean, the only Irish Catholic that's been elected had his head blown off in a very alchemical way, by the way, which I think is very telling. But yeah, American Catholicism is American Catholicism. It's not Roman Catholicism.
Yeah, not at all.
And that's the same thing with the Orthodox. So then what that's revealing is that before you get to the faith, the spiritual practice, there's a cultural difference. And again, I try to touch on how I've been able to understand the roots of that. So now, touching into the future, though, what we talked on this as well, that there's three camps that have been revealed: the Latinxers, the Boomers, and nosotros, right? And who are we, right? We are basically. It seems like this camp to me is the smallest camp. It's all males, but I'm not even going to say it's the smallest camp. I don't think it's the smallest camp, to be honest. It might be one of the biggest, if not the biggest. It's just latent, but it's basically. Go ahead.
The most potential.
Yeah, I think it's the cultural default.
Yeah, it just has the most potential. Yeah,
it's like a common position that people just sleep on. I mean, I got the words on me right now.
It's the cultural default. It's what it is. It's what it is to be Hispano, and whether again, we're not going to intellectualize it all. It's just we live it. And most Hispanos haven't given up on the patriarchy. They haven't, even if they don't go to church, if they walk by a church, even if they're Protestant, they'll still do a sign of the cross, or something in them definitely pushes them to want to do a sign of the cross as they walk by a church. It's like our holidays. If you go to a town, we're going to have a patron saint, and that saint's going to be processed through the streets, and you can't remove yourself from that. So I think, again, who else are we? I like to see it as like college dropouts, or just avoided college completely. People who went into the trades, went into their own business, or even if they went to college, but they didn't fit into, in a sense, the college indoctrination. But I would also, again, I'd include, gangsters. I include, street guys who maybe have gone up into the system, because I really again, within them I see the same principles living out, those same cultural principles still. That it's like that echo is still being heard within them, but even they take on a certain there's a martial valor, right, that's being involved. There's and these things are very masculine, and other groups don't have this. You know, Anglos don't have this at all. They've been castrated.
Yeah, I mean, there's always pride at hand. You know, someone insults you. You know, you got to do something about it. And if you don't, you know, everyone knows about it.
Yep.
An Anglo doesn't care.
You become a ranker. Yeah.
An Anglo doesn't care, but you know that can't shit doesn't go that way in our culture. You know,
because they don't have a sense. They don't have a sense of honor. To them, that's like old fashioned and like superstitious and ignorant and like not equal rights.
They just want to chase that bag. You know, they're just focused on the short term material gain. You know,
right?
And you know, I feel for them because like you know it's a struggle. You know, they've been done dirty. You know, you can't deny that. But at the same time, it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy, or I'm at a loss for words for it. But
it's just, I think I empathize.
It's a cycle that they're stuck in.
It must be the hardest thing for the Anglo who's woken up to this, his own history. You know, I think of people like Chesterton or other kind of famous Anglo Catholic converts. It must be very hard because you have to, in a sense, like swallow the pill of like really where we have an ancient history, a more ancient history, but really that's not our civilization anymore. That was killed at some point in history. And we lost our roots to that. And the world is fucked up. And again, I'm not necessarily just trying to play blame, because the devil can only do as much as you agree to dance with, you know? That's how the Jugandan also works that way, right? He'll sell you if you're buying. But this liberalism that's just decomposed over time, degenerated over time, and here's where we are today at Global Homo. And now if you're going to be considered free by the Anglos and their children, the Anglo-American establishment, is you need to have McDonald's in your country, you need to have abortion clinics, and your churches need to be flying gay flags. Otherwise, you're not free.
If you don't, Soros he's gonna organize a protest. Like it was pre-COVID. You know the protest with the feminists with the green bandanas. And all that?
Yes, of course.
It was like the biggest or like
campaign,
inorganic, like astroturfing fucking movement.
Yeah, no,
it came out of nowhere.
Right.
You know, it was on flimsy grounds, and the only one that they stuck to was like the abortion rate. And they were out here there was videos like all throughout Mexico in the major cities where they're trying to break into cathedrals to fucking ransack them.
Yeah.
While there's like mass and service, you know? And I remember I think in Chihuahua, I forgot which city, pero they tried taking down, you know, like our statues del Pancho Villa, you know, stuff like that. Like, yeah, exactly. Like it doesn't matter if it's a Confederate general or if it's a Mexican revolutionary, bro. It's the point that they want us to forget our roots, you know?
Yeah, it's wrapped in with anti-paternalism and anti-patriarchy, right? Like these people hate men, you know, and I always get on them. I'm like, you hate your father, and that's why you hate God, and you hate men, and so it's no surprise they all kind of become lesbians. But yeah, this stuff comes from Soros. This comes from outside. This isn't organic stuff. This comes from propaganda. This comes from concerted efforts. There's been tons of reports that I've dug into kind of following this kind of social engineering, right? We talked about the Italians and Irish. How did they become white, you know? But they're doing the same thing in Latin America. And it's not just Soros, but it's the American government as well is behind these movements. And there's a lot of documents that prove it even till this day. And they always have the same agenda. So another thing that we have to start doing is repatria. We have to start repatriando, right? And for me, I break it down into recolonizing and reconquering. Like, we have to kind of do what our ancestors did. We need to, once we have exactly. Once we have a good understanding of really what we are, what is our paradigm, what is this kind of spiritual opportunity in time that God's really giving us. I always bring this back into the spiritual. Once we have a really good grasp on that, we have to do what our ancestors did. We have to create towns. We have to, retake parts of land and offer a different model to whoever is looking for that. And I think here is like Pochos actually really play a huge role, because I'm sure you guys, have the same experience. When you go back home, you're given a certain level, a little bit more respect or leeway. Sometimes it could go the other way. Sometimes people want to fucking start some shit because they're player haters. But the point is that you have more influence down there. People see the way you dress. People see the things that are trending. And so you have more influence over people.
Pues yeah, dude, porque pues, money talks. Y hay $3. But, when you're here, like, it kind of reminds me, and I don't know if it's off topic, but here in America, right, I'm Mexican, and over there in Mexico, I'm American, right?
Right.
And it's not me calling myself that. It's just like what I'm being called by the respective societies, or just the people around me, right? So it's like a question of like, fuck, where do I live in, like at the border, Pero sí, it's true. You do have that influence because you're coming from, the United States, right?
Yeah, you're coming from the capital of cool.
Yeah, and straight up, it I think even Pochos, even the most like whitewashed ones, man, they all have a part, and they can all play an important role in at least like reintegrating these lost lands, because we're already entrenched in the society, right? Like, as much as like,
right.
Wignats would hate, we're owning businesses, we're adding on to the economy, right?
We're actually fighting to keep the businesses from being burnt down.
And
we're the ones fighting for it.
Yeah, not just the upper middle class, like Mexicans that are like as me and my buddies call them, like the upgraded Mexicans, right?
Yeah.
But like the fools that los morros que andan en la cuadra, pues they're defending the block and not letting that shit fly down, because like it comes back to just how strong we are as a community. And it ties back to
our roots,
Mediterranean family values,
Yeah, our roots, man.
Like, yeah, because like Anglos, they just like their whole inner circle starts and it ends at their front door, like inside their household. And even then, the family unity isn't that strong.
Yeah.
Whereas you're growing up in the barrio, la doña que vende churros or shit like that,
right.
que vende pues mangos and all that. Right, and if you see that shit in like another city where you're seeing some paletero get beat, like that's someone's uncle, and it's just that thing that kind of flames up. So as much as like people want to shit on the homies or the essays, like they're the ones putting in work, bro. They're the ones in the front line.
Yeah, they're the ones fighting. They're the ones fighting.
Yeah.
To protect. Yeah. People and property and neighborhoods, which is it's really funny, but it shows again the reality. Why doesn't the Anglo fight? Because there's nothing to fight for in his mind. There's nothing worth going to jail, losing my job. Like, it's not worth it. My culture, I know deep down inside, is degenerate. I know deep down inside, spiritually, we've cut ourselves from roots. I see what other people's have, and I see how we're jealous of it, and I see how we try to destroy it and sterilize it and make them take on this identity that we give them. I see how the Mexican lives, who has less money than me, perhaps, but he has things that I can never buy with my money, right? He has a family, he has tradition, he has folklore, and I don't have that. So I think that's the situation for the Anglo. Like, what the hell is he going to fight for?
They got castrated, and
spiritually,
it's something that didn't happen recently. It's just something
It
happened spiritually, and
yes.
now in modern times, you're seeing it in a more drastic or more obvious physical manner. You know?
Right. I mean, the way I see it is, they sold their soul to the devil, dude. They did some witchcraft, white voodoo shit, starting with Elizabeth, and then usury is a form of that. The Bank of London. Piracy, alchemy, all this stuff. Again, there's a reason why all these things spring out of England. If you look at Elizabeth herself, like the colony, the first colony that they made was Virginia, and people think that it's in reference to her as the Virgin Queen, but to be honest, it was a joke to make fun of the Catholics, because they're mocking the Virgin Mother of Jesus,
Mother Mary. Yeah,
they're mocking her. These people are very esoteric with their things, and so it's like, what you sell the soul to the devil, and he's going to give you some wealth. He's going to give you some power. He's going to give you a little bit of that. But after a while, you're going to have to pay, and it's going to be way more expensive than what you got for that short time period. That's alchemy at its root.
Mm-hmm. That just reminds me of how much of a trip John D was, man.
Yeah, totally.
Listen to John Bone Jones. I don't think that's his name. Picky Bones Jones.
Picky Bones Jones. Yeah.
He did the review on shit John D. Wrote about his experience.
Talking to demons. Do you know about John D, Rico? Real quick. Hold on, Rico. Do you know about John D?
Yeah. I guess one of the. Sorry about that, Rick.
No, it's all good. John D from Twitter.
But check out the story. I guess an actual angel came to John D. basically said, "Hey, dumbass, stop messing with this. The people, the other spirits that were talking to you were actual demons."
Yeah.
This dumbass wrote it off like if it was a demon. The one time the angel, you know what I mean?
Nah, dude, I've got jumped by demons like a few times. Wait, what's that?
Yeah. Demons are real.
No, what I'm saying was that this one was consorting with demons. He thought they were angels. Then the one time an angel appeared to tell him, like, "Hey, dumbass, get your shit together." He calls it a demon.
And it goes back to like especially like a lot of trad cats. Like I'm talking about like the Sed Kiss, like the super.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the things that I see, or I guess a lot of the trends within these groups of people, it's they're either wignats, so they're trying to change the church's teachings to justify their Anglo mindset that they're refusing to let go, and it's also the disenfranchised Catholic that they see all this like anti like papal hate, and like at the end of the day, like at least as for me as a Catholic, like he's still the Pope, and a lot of the times like I see those things that are taken out of context, but that's another discussion for another time. But
right,
it's funny because like these Catholics, these trad Catholics, they end up becoming the antithesis of what it means to be a Catholic. They become a neo-Protestant because they're so focused on just
the intellectual
here and the now. Like, is this trad enough? Is this you know what I mean?
No, it's the same thing.
There's Jehovah's Witnesses with Virgin Mary
extra
statues.
steps.
That's what they are.
Yeah, they're Jehovites with extra steps, bro. Like, pretty much.
Yeah, I call them orthoprots.
Yeah, it's something I see in both reflections, but obviously I'm only going to comment on the community that I'm part of.
Right, that you see.
Yeah,
but I think it's so funny that you see the same trend in the Orthodox Church. It's the exact same thing. It's like you just like the incense. And the
we got those boomer docs. Oh god, those boomer docs, dude. Oh my gosh.
But that's the majority of them, as far at least as what I've seen on Twitter. I would say most of them kind of have that outlook.
Yeah. And it goes back, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but I think we talked about it like before we started the stream.
Yeah.
Or the podcast. Is that the worst ones I see are like the pick-me Mexicans, the pick-me white men. So, besides this, like, this, I guess, movement or idea that we're all sharing.
Yeah.
The common
that we're uncovering.
Like these two things, right? The Latin Xers, you either become a Latin Xer or a normie conservative, right?
Right.
Which is like a big broad of things, but it's like either of those two, right? And I guess with the Catholics or the pick-me Mexicans that are in those like Catholic circles, they become trad and they try to kind of catch up. They try to play catch up with the white boy, you know?
Yes.
So, fuck, where was I going with this?
Dude, tell me.
But it's... Go ahead.
I want to know something about Mexican history. Would you describe El Porfiriato as a pick-me?
No, because he got ousted. He got ousted.
But what I'm saying, was he trying to copy and follow what the gringos were doing?
No, he gets a bad rap for trying to do that with the French. But
yeah,
I think at the end of the day, he was actually a patriot, unlike Benito Juarez, Vende Patrias.
Mm-hmm.
For real. El Porfiriato, you know, there was some things that was bad about him.
Sure.
But I remember seeing or reading how they did a comparison of Mexico City to New York. And New York at the same time was just like this dirty fucking... I mean, New York's always dirty. Like, shout out to all my friends over there. But, you know, it's New York, you know? And Mexico City was... It was the architecture and everything, because it was comparable to France, to Paris.
Yeah, no, it was a European
was, like, considered,
city.
like... Yeah.
I mean, it was the capital of the Spanish Empire. You know, it really was de facto. It was the center. It was where the trade went through. It was where people went through when they first came out here. You know, universities. But the thing is that one thing to understand too about the Spanish time is that the Spanish Empire was really more of a collection of city-states. Like the whole concept of these countries like Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, there's always, especially Mexico, there's always these regional tensions because everything's centralized around Mexico City, whereas during, ¿cómo se dice? Durante el imperio, the different regions of Mexico were autonomous in a sense, right? You had different kingdoms, Nueva Galicia, Nueva Vizcaya, Nuevo León. Mexico was just one kingdom, right? You even had the Kingdom of Guatemala. So
from my understanding, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, from my understanding, those viceroyalties, they were kind of there to just manage it.
Yes.
So when Mexico was independent, they still carried over that same kind of sense of centralization. So that's why we were not able to reach out to our northernmost provinces. You know, they're still rightfully ours. You know, but it was one of the things where Agustin, he kind of dropped the ball.
Well,
he just kind of focused on the center,
and that wasn't his fault. I think Agustin was kind of like and we're kind of entering into Mexican history, but I think Agustin was kind of like an innocent guy. Like he was just kind of dealing. He was kind of
put there.
Yeah, he was just dealing with the moment and trying to do the best with the moment. But what it reveals though is that the way that the Spanish administered the empire was more efficient because they weren't trying to centralize it out of Mexico City. Mexico City just happened to be the de facto focal point, but Mexico City didn't have authority over Monterrey. It didn't have authority over Guadalajara. It didn't have authority over Guatemala. It didn't have authority over Havana or Manila. Right? These were all centered around it. But they didn't. It wasn't administered from that point. It was administered as an empire, right? So the Spanish crown administered that, and it administered the same breakdown in Nueva Granada and in the Viceroyalty of Peru, and then finally in the Viceroyalty of El Rio Plata. So I mean, it's kind of amazing when you think of one of the things that they'd like to say is how the Spanish were awful administrators, are very antiquated. But these guys had the preeminent world power for 200 years straight, right? Nobody could touch them. That's a long time if you think about it. But these guys administered this gigantic empire, and there was no internet. There was no engines, no power boats. All this stuff was done the old-fashioned way. You guys there?
Yeah.
Okay. No. Yeah. My internet started acting up. Right when he said internet, I disconnected again.
Yeah. I'm here.
All right. Continue, bro.
No. I was just touching on that the Spanish model of empire was more city-state, and it allowed for more harmony because los asuntos de una región were being dealt with in that región. Right. It wasn't this federal system that's ran by this elite class in the capital city. It was it was more autonomous, right? It had to be because there was no other choice. But yet it worked better than what we've had for the last 200 years across Latin America. And again, the you can evidence that by all the conflicts that have been happening basically ever since we've been independent. I mean, even in a small country like Nicaragua, I mean, it's like every 40 years is going to have to be a war perpetually. And I think that's been the case in every Latin American country.
I think it just to add on before we continue on.
Yeah.
Is like, yeah, they say that like, you know, Latin America's like always and constantly at wars. And like, I really don't want to sound like a progressive, but like, you know, you got to call it out when it's there. Every time, at least looking into Mexican history, every time there's been a point of stability, the Masonics, the Jams,
yep,
they interfere, man. Like,
yeah, no, that's all across.
Yeah, like throughout history. So like, yeah, Mexico's been constantly at war, but it's like every time that we have a chance to be stable, you know, we kind of get the rug pulled under from us, and we had to start back at square one. Like, just like one example would be the Mexican Revolution of the early 1910s.
Yeah.
Madero, you know, think what you think about him. You know, he ended up getting power, and then he ended up getting ousted in a coup. It was the American ambassador. I forgot his name.
Right.
But the American ambassador convinced Huerta to take power and to assassinate Madero. So it ended up prolonging that conflict, you know?
Yeah, always. There's always American involvement in all these things. But here's where we diverge from sounding like progressives is that we're not going to blame the gringo. We're the ones who set ourselves up to get played. And so what we have to do is go back through these 500 years and see, like, why is it that there was a moment where we didn't get played? Right? Like, what was the difference? Where did we go off the rails? And what we have to understand again is that the history that's been taught us, nationally, you know, whether you're Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, Argentina, Peru, all these governments had a vested interest to make the Spanish look bad, right? They played into this black legend because it's like, oh yeah, they were bad. You have to let the Masons run your country.
Justify your
regime.
Your right to rule.
Right.
To justify it.
Exactly. So really that's where it comes from. And so every time you see these American interventions, well, what happens? There's always a group of people in our countries who works with the Americans to bring them in. Like, the Americans can't come in unless there's factionalism between us. And I don't mean between countries. I mean, even within our countries, there's these factionalisms. And it's always, again, I like to call them the proto-Latinxers or the proto-Pygmies, which is that Criollo Masonic elite who basically see what the Americans do, what the English do or the French do, and they want to do it too. They never look inside, right? We as a people have never really looked inside. This is, I think, the first generation, or the first moment where we're like, yeah, we've seen the whole world. We've met friends from all over the world. We need to go look inside ourselves and really see who we are, what makes us us. Because the world sees us, right? And the world may have certain impressions, and they may be false, they may be whatever. But it's really up to us to really define that. And we've had 500 years of this process. It's like the Spanish Empire for 300 years was necessary. The Masonic moment was necessary for those 200 years, because now, again, we can compare, we can start figuring it out. And I don't necessarily have the answers for that, but the point is that now we're able to look within ourselves. We're able to see, like, we don't want to dress that way. We don't have those values. We actually have really cool clothes. Why don't we make our clothes anymore? Why is it that everybody, no matter what city they're in around the world, all have the same fucking neon blue t-shirt with some ripped jean shorts and some Pumas? Why does
it's
everyone
that
dressed
I see
like
also
that?
in Mexico?
Yeah,
like we're trading in especially like in the more developed parts, you know, and to a lesser extent to like the local way that the buchones, how they like to dress, right, with the polo shirts and shit like that. And I'm guilty of that too, because I like that style. But cuando ya voy a los bailes allá, man, ya casi no se usa sombrero, you know, ya casi no se usa botas y tejanos. It's only the Chicanos that are doing that, you know.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I see some uno, dos, tres, morros que andan así de vestidos. But it's something that caught my eye was also like, yeah, like the buchon style that I thought was like kind of like a northern Mexican thing, coming out from Sinaloa. Like I remember I was talking to this girl from Jordan.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was from Jordan, somewhere in the Middle East. I've talked to like a lot of like
MENA girls. Yeah, we should do an episode on that.
That's right. I'll invite Axel.
Yeah, exactly.
Shout out to Axel.
Yeah,
listening to this, bro.
He's another soldier in the Hispanista Twitter. Or I don't even like calling us Hispanistas. I don't know what we are. We're mistos.
Because it's a no. Let's not even call ourselves Hispanistas because it brings a negative connotation. Because it goes back to like the pick-me Latins were like, okay, they're not sucking up to the white man, but they're sucking up to this glamorized ideal of the Spanish, right?
Right.
Like, at the end of the day, like we're already separated from Spain. Like the imperial spirit.
Yes.
It's our turn. Like the baton was passed on to us.
Yes.
Like Rome passed it on to Spain, and Spain passed it on to the former colonies, and it's up to us to pick up the torch and to keep on going on.
Yeah. Let me touch on that real quick. Just put my finger on that. It would behoove the Spanish to humble down and be like, can you guys come bail us out? We want to be a part of you guys. Like they would have to ask, they would have to apply. You know what I mean? But it's not something. Yeah, I don't necessarily see the Spanish anymore. I feel like the Spanish are like South French now. They're not. The real Spanish are in Spanish America. Like, yeah, they diverged.
They just became part of the European Union, like in the sense of like a cultural thing. Just the way that I've talked to some when I went to college, some exchange students, they have that same mentality as like you would say.
And I will add this thing about the Spanish is that here's the reality: they at least have a door to us, like because there are some cool ones that do try to like kind of program with us. And, the reality is maybe these people have to just bail ship and come out here and, we'll welcome them. Just because they're related to us.
It wouldn't be the first time, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I didn't mean to knock you off track. You were going
about how the modern kind of dress style, like the
yes,
clothes, like it's a cool thing because like I like to have things in common. But like the whole like the glamorous way that we wear our Ferragamo belts and our Italian shoes, and our buttoned up, our Hugo Boss and stuff like that.
Right. Like
Iraqis are wearing that shit too, like Iraqi men and shit like that. And it's a cool thing that could bring us together. But at the same time, like I love the cowboy look. That's like something we have, And if it dies out in Mexico, then it's just gonna be the Anglos that are gonna have that, bro. And I love them, That's cool that they wear it, but we gotta keep our roots in touch.
Yeah,
I think that's what I was getting to.
Yeah, no, because in Latin America they are adopting the it's happening like
the TikTok look. Yeah,
but here's our moment, and this is really interesting for us to come to this moment of consciousness, of historical consciousness, of ethnic consciousness, of spiritual consciousness, and see this moment where it's like we have the choice right now. We don't have to keep going this way. And if you look at things like the economies of our countries, like E. Michael Jones brings this up, but basically every economy that has ever developed has developed itself on its own textile manufacturing industry. The Florentines, the English, the Americans, producing your own clothes is a good way to get people out of poverty, right? Whether you're growing cotton or you're producing textiles or you're producing clothes, it's a very easy way to get your country to start developing economically. But it goes against these vested interests who want to sell us cheap Chinese-made clothes that are all fucking made the same. And so, but at the same time, it's a way to degenerate our culture. It is just as much an aspect of colonialism, neo-colonialism, because now everybody's dressing the exact same when, again, because we're looking outside. The key is we got to look inside. We got to see our roots. We got to see our values, and we can express it with our clothing. These are things that I identify as big opportunities in business, which we're going to do a business podcast, but big opportunities in business where clothing manufacturing, because it is going to go back. This camp, which is the default camp.
it's something that's going on right now. Like you look at like any like YouTuber or any stuff like that, like they have their own streetwear brands, or even if they're just like dudes on Instagram, like the whole streetwear brands, like that's a flourishing industry. That's just like a bunch of dudes like from high schoolers to like college buddies,
Right.
you know, getting together,
Right.
and making their designs and selling it.
Right. So we kind of need to elevate that, right? To showing the craftsmanship. Like you go to places like Oaxaca, and there's other places in Mexico, of course, but Oaxaca is really well known for its craftsmanship in textile manufacturing. And it's like, if you look at the paintings, the casta paintings and all the other paintings of during that time period, you see how well dressed even the poorest people looked. And that all came from being produced from la mano de obra of the people around you. So everybody had work and everybody had these advanced skills, as opposed to they took the craft, they took it out and they put it into factories in China. And now we have to buy those clothes, while then we have to go move up north to go work because there's no native industry anymore.
Yep, it is happening to an extent because like I forgot the name of the brand, but like I've seen a few where like it has like a sick ass design and it has like the Águilas Aztecas, like the fighter squadron that
Oh,
like
really?
fought in World War II. It has it there, yeah, and it's like a very like Chicano centric like look to it that it's just like expressing, you know, the culture.
Yeah. I've seen some dress shirts with kind of that you know, those arches on the back. It's not like a guayabera, but it's like a Tejano guayabera. You know what I mean?
No, I know what you mean. I think I have a few of those.
So I mean, I kind of reached the end of the outline here, and I know we've bounced around a lot. So I think what I'm gonna end up doing is just probably cutting this into like little snippets, little questions, which I think is actually cool. I need that instead of just having a bunch of long content. But then I think also I'll go through it and there'll be stuff to like maybe create future episodes on to dive in deeper. Like, you know, I'd like to really understand more about the chain of events of Mexican revolutions, because it all seems like they all lead into the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, you know, amongst other things that we've touched, let me kind of go through here. You know, again, just to kind of reiterate, the real dialectic is not black and white. It's gringo versus Hispano, right? And I like to break it down as like the city of God versus the city of man, to harken back to Augustine, where again, the Spanish model, the Spanish had a spiritual responsibility for their empire and the subjects of their empire, whereas the Anglos didn't have that. It was just might makes right. The law of gravity, force is all that really exists in the world. Evolution, you know, again, all these things tie into their science, which you touched on about how they try to legitimize themselves because they can't legitimize themselves theologically anymore. And so, you know, over time, that's basically created white people. It's transformed the Italians and the Irish into white, and now they have the same kind of problems and values as them. And white really means liberal European, you know, capital L, liberal European. It's not the Slavs. It's not the traditional Catholics wherever they're found in a cave in Italy or Spain. You know?
Yeah. Like for me, like I use white to describe it's as an American concept, because like
yes, it totally
I have
is.
friends that are like European, like, you know, nationalists,
right?
And Europeans, they don't see themselves as white. You know, like the whole Wignat fantasy of like a Mo Europa, you know, with the fucking V.
We're Greeks. We're
know,
Greeks.
It's an American.
We was Greeks and shit.
Because you talk to a French nationalist, you know, he'll say he's French, you know,
right?
Or a third positionist, even, you know, he'll say, okay, well, I'm Spanish, you know, I'm not white,
right?
You know, because
but there are people. There are people within the European countries though who do identify as white. It's like they've been brainwashed too. They've been liberalized. They've been cut from their roots. So you see both dynamics. At least in my experience, I've seen both.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of lame. But you know, again, it's like it's the same thing. That it's liberalism being spread out into Europe, and I think the people who have the strongest ethnic identities tend to be the Slavs. You know, the Poles, the Russians, the Serbians.
Yeah.
You know, the ones who lived under communism are the ones who are the most traditional. Go figure. But I like to emphasize that gringo to me is a spiritual condition, like Ugandan or Nigerian. It's really a spiritual condition that these people find themselves in, because to me, it's almost like each one is a broker version of the other one. They're all rooted in the same thing. They all reject Logos. They all reject Christ. They all reject the Logos incarnate. They all reject truth, right? Everything's relative. They just end up LARPing, you know? So it's kind of funny. I want to touch on the next phase of the race war, because I think this is an important point that really hasn't been explored, at least not in the conversations we've had in Twitter over the last couple of months. But I really believe that in the next phase of this kind of consciousness, as this thing continues to grow, these trends continue to grow, as we wake up in this moment where we really are at a crossroads. Which way do we want to go? The black gringos will join the white gringos.
Oh yeah,
well, I mean, regardless of the
racial tension.
I kind of cut you off.
No,
it's all good. I mean, they, really, they're the same.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you're a progressive or if you're a diehard Trump supporter. They're both symptoms of the same root cause,
Yeah,
it's liberalism.
Well, but my point is that as this racial tension, this cultural spiritual tension comes out, where it's the dialectic is in black and white. It's really gringo and Hispano. I believe that black gringos will join the white gringos against us.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, and you already see it. You see the pick me, morenos that they like to fly that Confederate flag, which is cool now. And then of course you have the progressive whites that are out here ranking it more for like Black Lives Matter than the actual morenos. Like, just look at Portland, dude. You see the majority of those guys, it's just a bunch of white boys.
Right, it's just white guys.
Some of them have big noses. That's all I'm saying.
Ugandans.
Ugandans.
Hey.
But yeah, no, I really see them banning. Like, if a race war really popped off, I think blacks would actually join whites, and I think they would both fight against us. I don't know if I'm projecting, but
and we gotta make the distinction for our Dominicano brothers, because they don't really consider themselves as blacks.
Exactly, and that's another thing, that like race is not such a thing in Latin America. Like, I'm not saying that it's not a factor, but it's not an obsession. It's not something that taboos get built around. Your grandma might tell her pretty granddaughter who's mixed, right, or mestiza or mulatilla, she'll tell him, like, get with a light-skinned guy, right? But it's not because she thinks that the prieto is ugly. It's because she wants her daughter to kind of have access to more money. And the assumption is that the lighter you are, the more money you have. It's not always the case, of course not. But that's kind of the assumption.
Yeah.
And I think it also shows, like, there is a hierarchy. It's like we can't pretend that we're all created equal in the sense that we all have equal dignity before God, but not in like actual living life. Like, there is hierarchy. There's naturally going to be a hierarchy of people, even within the same groups, even within the family, right? Like, all these things are connected. Like, there's going to be a hierarchy in the house. The dad has to be the head of the house, right? Gringos really have a problem with this concept. Both white guys taking this role and white girls giving that kind of authority.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to the negros among us, like, there are negros. They're not black. That's the other thing. Like, they are not black gringos. Like, genetically, they're not black gringos. Culturally, they're not black gringos. But here in this country, they kind of try to steal our negros. Like, they're Hispano just like us. They have the same paternal DNA. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like the American dialectic forces that black or white tension, and so it tries to force people out of their roots. The white gringos do the same thing as the black gringos do. The black gringos do it to other black people, whether they're from Africa or East Africa, which again, these are actually different races, but your skin is dark, so then you belong to us, and we was kings. Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
that's right.
And then there's the Latinxers, like the majority, like everyone else. That's like, oh yeah, we're both equally oppressed, you know, and it just kind of mixes them in.
Yeah, they take in the same. Yeah, they take into the same spirit. Well, you know, I don't know if you saw this, Rico, but they've done research on how much is that term used, and only 3% of Hispanics use that term.
Yeah, like
so they're a minority, dude.
It's mostly an American thing. It's an American thing. They're trying to export it, you know, and by the grace of God, it's not taking prominence.
Not working.
I don't know if it was one of our mutuals, but it was someone that was like, he was in Colombia, and he asked like a taxi guy, like, oh, like, do you guys use Latinx or something like that? And then the taxi guy was like, what is that? And then like he explained it, and the taxi guy, he was like just laughing. He's like, ay, las cosas que sacan los gringos, pues, you know.
¿Qué es esa mierda?
Hey, ¿qué es esta mierda? Esta vaina.
¿Qué es esa vaina? No joda. But and another point that I want to wrap it up with here again is that the opportunity that we're facing, this moment we're facing, is primarily a spiritual moment. There is a political aspect to it, but we need to understand, again, to touch back to hierarchy, is that it's primarily a spiritual opportunity for ourselves. And we've seen it on the microcosm. You know, each of us we've come back to the church, right? And so it's like there is something there. We've gone into the churches that got abandoned, and we're picking up the cross that was like on the floor, like almost buried, because nobody comes into the church anymore. And so it's like we're picking up the cross. We're picking up really the theology, the church history. We're catechizing ourselves in a way that we were never really catechized over the last 500 years. And so the opportunity is to play that role, to play the role of provider and protector and spiritual guide, right? Like the man is supposed to be the king, but also the bishop of his own house. He's the priest of his house, right? Like his children's spiritual state is as much his responsibility, is actually mostly his responsibility than anybody else's. Because it's easy to get lost in the politics and say like, oh, we're gonna come up with this thing, and here's like, we're gonna scheme, we're gonna make this plan, we're gonna make this agenda. You know, we're gonna get lost into this worldly fight, when my approach is, let's focus on creating good Hispanos, good men, you know, men that are useful with their minds and their hands. Let's start families in God's way, right? Let's create families to give glory to God the way that He taught us, the way that our ancestors lived. And I think the rest just comes naturally. It's not something that we need to like plot. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just going to be bestowed upon us. And I think that's a testament truly to not only our faith, but our faith is our culture, right? It's really showing that we recognize we're in God's hands. We don't have to be these political masterminds, treating the world like a chessboard. We just got to like live right and seek God. And we know that it'll all come to us. You there, Fonz?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys wanted to touch on any of that point, the little spiel I just gave.
It was good. No, I just keep on disconnecting, but no, man, you're good.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, what do you think about that? Like, again, the opportunity, as I see, is really more of a spiritual thing. It's not a political thing. We don't have to like jump into political action. It's more about like, let's be righteous men. Let's start righteous families, and it'll be added on to us.
That's where it starts. That's the foundation.
Right.
Yeah. Ultimately, you're right. Everything is God's will at the end of the day, you know?
Yeah.
We're at His mercy.
Like, yeah, material things like the world and all that. Like, at the end of the day, we're not going to take that to us, you know, to the afterlife.
Right.
So we just got to live right, like you're saying. And just by doing that as a group and stuff like that, we're going to be setting up a foundation for the next generation to pick up the cross, to pick up that torch.
Yeah, and
to carry on.
You give life to those roots, because here's the reality is that the Anglos cut their roots, 200 years ago. Our roots were damaged 200 years ago, but it's like they weren't cut, right? It was like somebody threw a box over the plant and it's not really getting sun anymore. But if you look at the roots, they're still green, right? And you can see this in our fertility rates. Like our fertility rates have crashed over the last 40 years, right? From like 6 to 7
but we're still doing better, man.
But we're just at replacement rate. So it's like we don't have to continue that negative trend. We don't have to go the way of the Anglos and the liberal Europeans. We can go our own route. And I think this opens up really like a new paradigm where it's like we're not Westerners, right? We're not trying to be Westerners. We're not trying to be Easterners. We're not East. We're not West. We're South. We have to really identify, like, create our own macro cultural identity and paradigm. Otherwise, we're just going to go down that same track that these people have gone into. And that means that your great grandkids are either going to be gay or Muslim.
Híjole.
That's the way of the white man.
Yep.
And so the question is, as Hispanos, do we want to go down that route? Do we really, really want to go down that route? I don't think we do. I think that this is the question that wakes up that third camp. The issue is that these people are brainwashed, man. Telemundo and Univision and Facebook.
Oh, bro, don't even get me started on Telemundo or Televisa, bro.
Yeah, and Facebook.
IQ garbage, dude.
No, not just that, but like the conspiracies. Like we could probably bring this up in a later podcast, but just to spitball it.
Yeah.
There's like a popular, like, I guess, like pornography like company in Mexico. It's called Sex Mex, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they say that Televisa owns that shit, dude.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. Televisa's fucking. They own a lot of shit.
Is it Ugandan owned? Probably.
Most likely.
Crypto Ugandan?
Probably crypto Ugandan.
Of the saucy variety,
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's the stuff that we're competing against. And so then I think over time, I know this sounds a little bit crazy, but like when I'm talking about recolonizing and reconquering, like I'm actually like working on that, right? Like I'm working on a couple land deals, and I've already talked to people from, it's actually Slavs from church who are like, Noel, hey, I know you got the lowdown on buying some land in Nicaragua. Like, hook us up. Like, what's the deal?
Nice.
So I'm thinking of what I'm working on is basically buying a big piece of land and,
start your own village.
And it's, essentially. Right. And, there's a formal way to go about that, and I think, honestly, the government down there would probably like people coming in with skills and capital. But like that's really what we have to do. We have to kind of be a little Amish. I'm not saying we should be Amish, but you get what I'm saying. Like we have to create these communities, and
and it wouldn't be harmful either, because like at least in Mexico, like the Menonitas, bro.
I was just gonna
those
say
guys
that.
are integrated.
Yeah,
they're like I know, like everyone has like this whole like nightmare of like these other ethnic groups coming in and making their own colonies, right? And for a while I thought that too. It's like, what the fuck are these Canadians doing here, right?
Right.
But they speak the language. They contribute to the economy, by selling their crafts, their cheeses,
right.
Their bread, which is hella good, Saludos a Nuevo Ideal Durango. And
toda mi gente, la plebada.
Así nomás. And yeah, it's like even like a Slav like thing in Nicaragua, like even if they, still keep their roots, as long as they're speaking Spanish and they're contributing to the local economy, then that's a massive dub,
Yeah, but and I'm not trying to like make it exclusive with Slavs. I think it's like Pocho's got to do this.
Yeah,
it's like it's really us Pochos have to go about this, because again, if we don't, we're gonna lose our heritage, and we're at that
like
crossroads.
You said, our kids are gonna end up being gay
or Muslim, or I mean, if they're gay, the next generation they'll be Muslim. If they even make it that long, and that's the reality. So it's like we have that choice, and I think that's really the Hispano moment, right? That's kind of what I'm trying to get at throughout this whole idea. It's like we are at that crossroads. We can decide which way to go, and I think Pochos are going to play a big role in that. And I think we already have. I mean, this trend is already happening. It's not like I'm coming up with this. Like, there's, that guy Andy himself went to the Dominican Republic. I've met a lot of Colombians that are actually from New York. When I was, when I go through Colombia, that just moved back. I know a bunch of Mexicans who come here, work, save up some money, build houses back home, build a little taller, and then they go back. Nicaraguans, you've done that, or you're doing that? I've done that too. I actually own a property. I own a property in Managua. When I was making some money.
My old man and me were ahí tenemos unos terrenitos allá en Durango, and I'm planning, like, for me, bro, it's like, if shit goes down, like, hardcore here.
Yeah.
Like, fuck it, open up a paneria, over in la ciudad and just chill.
Yeah. That's right. And that's what a lot of people are doing. I mean, I know tons of Nicaraguans who came here as young men. These are more boomer types. But they came here as young men. They became mechanics or electricians or whatever shit. Made American money, went back to their pueblos, bought like some land in the middle of town, built like commercial property, built a taller, bought a coffee farm, and now they're living very well. And so again, this thing's already happening. And I think the COVID shit's only making it more obvious. The racial tensions here is making it more. I'm not saying we're going to abandon the land. I don't see that happening.
It's not gonna go like the fucking Turner Diaries, but like
no. I think what it's gonna tie the regions together, because think about it. Now, I mean, I know both of you guys coincidentally from Durango, but imagine if one of you was from Chiapas and another one's from Colombia and I'm from Nicaragua. It's like, well, we grew up in the same boat. We all grew up around each other. We're all in the same boat, and it's like, well, now we can have a network of businesses throughout Latin America, right? And
not even and it's not even limited to just like other like Hispanos, like of course like Filipinos, like they're kind of like halfway, but like even with like the Vietnamese here in the Bay Area, like growing up in the hood with some of them, and like going through the same struggles, it creates this bond that you don't see in like kids that grow up in like suburbia,
right? Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I grew up with some Vietnamese in my clique too. They were very Hispano-sized.
Oh yeah,
truth be told,
I got them to fucking bump corridos and shit now.
Yeah, same here.
He was listening to El Fantasma out of his Lexus, and all
that. Hella flush Lexus.
Yeah, you already know.
Yo.
Fucking Kevin Wynn head ass. You know what I'm talking about? That's like the little meme, their version of the Chad meme.
Yeah. No, yeah, I see, and that's the same dynamic with the Slavs, right? It's like these people, especially with the Vietnamese, because I'm assuming it's probably easier to connect with the Catholics. Not saying that you couldn't connect with the Buddhist Vietnamese, but even with the Catholic Vietnamese, it's more of a connection. Because you're speaking the same cultural program. Yeah, exactly. So, and again, the Hispano history and kind of mission has shown that people always get integrated. I mean, there's Japanese throughout Latin America who get absorbed, and that's the thing. These identities don't create tension, right? Like in Nicaragua, there's towns that were founded by Germans. And even if you're not German, people in the town speak German and Spanish just because they've learned it over time. And these families have been there for generations. And, a big chunk of them intermarry. Some of them marry within themselves because a lot of them kind of came out. But the point is there's no tension between them being German and being Nicaraguan and being Hispano.
Yeah, like, you got to look at, like, also, like, at least in Mexico, like, the the Middle Easterners that came
Yeah,
over,
of course.
you know, and their waves.
Oh, yeah.
You know, some of them were Muslims, and they ended up converting. They ended up assimilating. You know, like that's how we got tacos al pastor.
Yeah.
And like that conspiracy theory where Zapata like fled to Lebanon after he faked his death. You know, like crazy shit like that. You know.
Yeah, no, and the Mina influence not only came in directly from the Spanish themselves, but yeah, much later in time from Lebanon and Syria, from the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, those people went all over Latin America. Obviously, again, Mexico's always the first point people go to, but you know, my wife, she's Colombian from La Costa Caribeña, and she's of Lebanese Syrian descent.
Yeah, there you go.
I think
I probably have some Lebanese.
Yeah. The Middle Eastern influences. I would go as far as saying it like from like the genetic makeup is like the fourth biggest influence amongst Hispanos, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then probably close by the East Asian. Obviously, the Filipinos. Like I think I actually had a Filipino ancestor somewhere in my maternal grandma's line.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good stuff. I mean, I'm gonna just stop recording here, but we can keep chatting.
Yeah,